The Guerrilla Girls were an innovative group of anonymous female artists who helped to equalize men and women's visibility in contemporary art institutions. In the 1980s, Ronald Reagan was elected President of the United States, making it a Republican country ruled by men, and the economy was at an all-time low, leaving the U.S. in a debt of $2.3 billion. Reagan was against the welfare mother. He would ignore the people if they weren't rich and believed in letting them figure it out on their own. In the words of one of the founders of the Guerrilla Girls, Kath Kollwitz, he believed the cream rise to the top. This was a misconception in the business world as well as in the art world. In 1985, New York City's Museum of Modern Art exhibited the work of 169 artists, with only 13 of them from women. As quoted by Kath Kollwitz, if your work wasn't shown in this exhibit, they said you might as well quit your career as an artist. In response to this, multiple female artists came together and created the anonymous group, the Guerrilla Girls, who peacefully protested their rights as artists by posting facts on posters all over New York. Because the Guerrilla Girls stood up and spoke out against the sexism and racism in modern art museums, the museum curators had negative attention drawn to them, which led them to include more and more women artists in their museums.
Artist Kathy Kollwitz.
Well, the Guerrilla Girls are an anonymous group, so each of us picks a dead woman artist to use as a pseudonym, the name of a dead woman artist. And mine is Kathy Kollwitz, so I'm not blood related to her, but I am related to I do feel a real relationship to ideas in her work. For example, she was a political artist who was an activist also in her life, which I consider myself the same.
Ronald Reagan was re-elected as president in 1984 by winning the people's hearts with foreign policies. He was the one who ended the Cold War. He would openly mention how he disliked the Soviet Union, saying they were an evil empire. He strongly supported anti-communist groups and movements worldwide by dedicating his first term by building his military against the USSR. He was also the one who bombed Libya in 1986 and was responsible for the Iran-Contra affair. Kathy Kollwitz again.
Did the fact that Ronald Reagan was president affect the sexism towards women artists?
You know, the Reagan years were really curious because basically what Reagan believed was if you weren't successful, it was your fault. Everybody should be rich, and if you weren't rich, it was completely your own personal fault. He was the one who coined the term welfare mothers. He had a lot of ideas about a lot of ridiculous ideas about what people did with their lives and what their lives were like. And it was in this time that the Guerrilla Girls were born, because it kind of carried over to the art world. In the art world, people believed that the cream rose to the top. The best artists were the ones who were the work sold for the most and were the most famous and revered. And we were a bunch of women who knew so many wonderful, incredible women artists who did fantastic work, but their work just wasn't being shown. We knew that it was a block that the system was American.
Since this affected the art world so much, a group of women artists came together and posted posters of facts against the sexism in modern art and named themselves the Guerrilla Girls. Before they started, there was an art neighborhood in New York named Soho, where posters were posted that talked about all sorts of things like music, events, and more.
A couple of us had this idea to do posters, and we brought the first poster. We invited a few friends to a meeting, and we brought the poster to that meeting, and that's how. And we named it. Got around put the first posters up on the street a couple of weeks later, and all hell broke loose. And here we are, all these years later, still doing this, crazy, outrageous activist work.
The Guerrilla Girls thought it would be a good idea to use this area to share their thoughts and ideas. By posting the posters, they fought for their rights in a transgression manner. Why have peaceful protests rather than more violent ones?
Well, I think what we do is we found a way to use our own creativity to try to do a kind of political art that doesn't just point to something and says, this is bad. Our idea was to take an issue, twist it around, try to present it in a different way using facts and humor and sometimes a little fake fur. And,
Looks great.
And we try to change people's minds about the issue. So while we use the name Guerrilla, that in-your-face freedom fighter kind of way, we certainly have never, it's satirical. I mean, we're not violent, and we don't usually do street protests and things like that. We're these creative complainers who make kind of creative artwork that talks about issues that we care about.
By using guerrilla tactics, they sneak around New York and hang up posters and get into museums to distribute their thoughts on sexism and racism. Why do you choose quote-unquote guerrilla warfare tactics?
Well, we don't use warfare tactics, but we use guerrilla tactics. Guerrilla tactics are sneaking around in the middle of the night, doing culture jamming. We do that all over the world. We infiltrate museums. We criticize museums right on their own walls. We do billboards about the pathetic film industry and its treatment of women directors and also, women in the film themselves. We kind of take on any subject we want, and we try to kind of sneak around and present something to people that might change things.
The Guerrilla Girls are a well-known anonymous group that has been created to help women artists all over the world be recognized for their talent. Ever since they started their peaceful vengeance for women, women have been more recognized in art and are having their art shown more in museums. They try to change the art world for the best. Do you think that you have changed the art world for the best? If so, how?
I think that our work has definitely had an influence. When we started out, nobody wanted to think about women's issues. Nobody wanted to think about feminism. There had been an older group of artists who had made big strides in protesting some of these same issues. And in the mid-'80s, when we started out, it had all kind of gone away. And there was still, most galleries in New York showed less than 10% women artists or none at all. And most museums showed none, basically. Hardly any. One or two. Maybe over like 5 years or something like that. So we certainly had a lot to go after, and I think our stuff was so in your face, and it had such a big effect on the little clubby art world that people started paying attention to these issues. We made people count. I mean, you look at a museum, you go in and you think, hey, there aren't any women artists on the wall. There aren't any artists of color on the wall. And that's a really interesting thing to look at, because the only reason there aren't, if you don't see any, is discrimination. And we think some discrimination is unconscious, some is conscious, and we can get people to see this and stop doing it. And we've heard from a lot of people in museums saying it has changed their ideas, and it has changed what they do.
Thanks to the Guerrilla Girls, women artists like me have a chance in the world of art.